We're asked to solve the missing sides with a precision of 0.0, which means round to the first decimal place, or the 10th place. And in each question, we're given one angle on one side. So let's look at the first one. We have an angle, and we have one side, which is adjacent to that angle. And we're asked to find the hypotenuse, the longest side, the side opposite to our right angle. So which one did you use, adjacent and hypotenuse? Well, that's cosine. So we take the cosine of our angle, which is 35 degrees. And we're going to set that equal to adjacent over hypotenuse. Well, adjacent is 8 inches over hypotenuse. So let's leave that as h. And so this becomes a simple algebra problem. We're going to multiply the whole thing by h first. And that's just to get it on top so that we can then get it by itself. So it cancels out on this side. We get h. Let me move this up a little bit. We get h equals, not h equals, h times the cosine of 35. And let's get this in parentheses. And that's equal to 8. Okay, well from there we can just divide by the cosine of 35 on both sides, and that would cancel it on the left. So we get h equals 8 divided by the cosine of 35. And we can use our calculator to figure this out. So we type it in. We do 8 divided by the cosine. Let's go ahead and find, there it is, cosine of 35. And we get, what, 9.8. So for our hypotenuse over here, we get just 9.8. Let's go ahead and make that look a little bit nicer. 9.8 inches. So let's try this second one. In the second one, we're given an angle on a side, and again, we're given the adjacent side, but this time, we're given the opposite. So we know the adjacent, and we're looking for the opposite. Well, which one of these use adjacent and opposite? Well, that's tangent. So let me get my tangent color. We get the tangent of the angle, 42 degrees, equals opposite over adjacent. Well, we don't know what opposite is. So I'm going to go ahead and just call that x for now. And only because I don't want to put O on top, because if I put O on top, it's going to look like a 0, and it's going to confuse you. So let's go ahead and call this one x. And we're going to set that over adjacent, which is just 7 centimeters. Well, again, this just becomes an algebra problem. So we multiply by 7 on both sides to cancel it out. And we just get, well, we get 7 times tangent of 42 equals x. So 7 times tangent of 42 equals x, or the opposite side. So we type that into our calculator. And we say 7 times tangent of 42. What do we get? We get 6.3. So we get equals 6.3. And so we'll write that over here for our opposite is just 6.3. In this case, it's centimeters. Now let's go ahead and write out that previous answer too, right next to it. So equals 9.8 inches, and box that one as well. Okay, let's find one. Well, in this one we're given an angle, but we're given 2 missing sides. We could choose either one first. Well, I'm going to go ahead and just choose this one. So in this case, we're given an angle, and we know the adjacent to the angle, and in this case we know the opposite, so we can just do tangent again. So tangent of angle 60, what's going to equal opposite over adjacent? Well, we don't know that, so this time let's just call this angle. I can call it any angle I want, really. I'm going to call it angle Q, because I don't want it to be 0, because I don't want 0 on top over 3, because that's going to look like 0, not O. And I don't want it to be x, because we used x last time, so I'm just going to call it angle Q, because why not? For question mark. So we can now solve for the length Q. Well, it just becomes simple algebra, again, excuse me. And we could do all this switching around, multiplying by 3, and that just becomes, well, actually this one's pretty straightforward, pretty simple. We just multiply by 3 on both sides, and that cancels out, and we get 3 times the tangent of 60, so 3 times the tangent of 60 equals Q, which equals, well, let's go ahead and type that in, 3 times the tangent of 60 And we get 3 times the square root of 3. Well, I don't like that answer. I'm going to get a real number, so I'm going to convert it by hitting this button down here. And we get 5.2 feet. Okay, well, let's go ahead and put that in down here. So now we have to find this third side. Well, there's actually a few ways we can do it. We could use the sine of angle 60. The sine of angle 60 is going to equal the opposite over the hypotenuse. Well, we know the opposite is 5.2 now over the hypotenuse, which we don't know, so we'll leave it as that. And then we can solve this way. Or we could use the cosine of angle 60. And we can do the adjacent over the hypotenuse, which is 3 over h. Or we could do one that you might not be thinking about, and that's, since this is a right triangle, and we know 2 of the sides, this formula right here works perfectly in this example, because again, this is a right triangle, so we know a squared. Well, a squared is 3 squared. Let me go ahead and get my pencil back. It's 3 squared. We could, and we know b squared is now 5.2, and that will equal c squared. And you can use any one of these 3, and they will all give you the same answer, more or less. Although I will say that this one would probably be the best one to use, because we aren't using a rounded number. We're using the original number given to us. And the other 2 are using 5.2, which we actually got from our calculator, which was a rounded number. So it won't be as close to the exact answer as the others. So I'm going to rewrite it over here. The cosine of angle 60 equals 3 over the hypotenuse. And we can do all this where we multiply by h and then divide by the cosine of 60. Or we could recognize that we could just put this over 1, and then we could just cross multiply and divide. So we do 1 times 3 divided by the cosine of 60 to equal h. So h equals 3 times 1, which is just 3, divided by the cosine of 60. We just type that into our calculator. So 3 divided by the cosine of angle 60. And what do we get is 6. So great, it equals 6 feet.